Hello and welcome to the Remote Revolution, a podcast by Virtual Mojo. This is where we explore how modern businesses are transforming the way they work through remote teams, virtual support, and smarter operational strategies. In each episode, we bring you insights, conversations, and practical ideas to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and growing companies build efficient, scalable, and future-ready organizations. If you're looking to work smarter, scale faster, and unlock the power of remote talent, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 19 of the Remote Revolution, with your host Aneeq and Umaima as our guest. Today, we're discussing the hidden warning signs many companies miss before remote team performance starts to break down. We'll talk about how communication gaps, accountability issues, disengagement, and weak management systems can quietly build over time until problems suddenly become impossible to ignore.
Yeah, and it's a topic that honestly is so critical right now.
It really is. I mean, the whole mission of this deep dive today is to basically shatter a very comfortable illusion.
Oh, absolutely. The illusion is everywhere.
Right, because right now, there is this pervasive assumption out there. If you see a little green active dot next to an employee's name on whatever messaging app you use, you just assume everything's fine. You assume your business is healthy.
Yeah, which is just, it's incredibly dangerous.
It is. So let's be controversial right out of the gate here.
Yeah.
That green dot, it is the ultimate mirage. Like, if you manage a team and you are relying on that dot to tell you how things are going, your team might be actively deteriorating right beneath your nose, and you wouldn't even know it.
Completely. I mean, it's a classic case of confusing activity with actual stability.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Because when we look at traditional office environments, management often function through what you could call visual flight rules, VFR.
Wait, like in aviation?
Exactly like aviation. You could literally see the weather out the window. You could physically read the atmospheric data of a room.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, like if a team was struggling, you just saw it. You saw the low energy, or you noticed two people kind of avoiding each other in the break room, or you heard that frustrated sigh from the desk next to yours.
Yeah, you pick up on the vibe.
Exactly. But remote work completely blinds you to VFR. You are forced to fly on instruments alone. And the
instruments are broken.
Well, the instruments most managers use are just fundamentally flawed. They are looking at outputs. They see, Slack messages sent, pushed, meetings attended, and they assume those outputs indicate human alignment.
Right, which makes perfect sense logically, but it's totally backwards. It's like if you are flying in a massive storm and your only instrument is a dial that says engine is running.
Yes, perfect analogy.
Like, great, the engine is running, but that doesn't tell you if you are flying upside down or about to crash into a mountain.
Exactly. It just tells you fuel is burning.
So, okay, let's unpack this a bit. If looking at output data is the wrong approach, let's explore the actual mechanics here. How does a team really start to break down under the surface? Like, what are the earliest warning signs?
Well, the initial breakdown almost always starts with the erosion of communication efficiency, not the volume of communication, mind you.
Wait, really? So they might actually be talking more?
Oh, the volume might actually go way up. But what you start to see are these micro delays that just compound over time.
Give me an example.
So, in an office, resolving a minor ambiguity takes what? A 90-second conversation over a cubicle wall. Hey, did the client mean X or Y? Oh, they meant Y. Done.
Right. Super fast.
But in a remote setting, if the communication architecture is poor, that exact same minor ambiguity turns into a 6-hour asynchronous Slack thread.
Ugh, I've been in those threads. They are brutal.
Right, because people start waiting for permission. They become reactive instead of proactive because the cognitive overhead of trying to explain a nuanced problem through text is simply too high.
So they just do the bare minimum required to close the ticket and move on.
Exactly. It's preservation mode.
That is wild. Looking at a remote team strictly through the lens of task completion, it reminds me of judging a restaurant's health solely by how many plates are leaving the kitchen doors.
Look, I like that.
Right. You're sitting in the dining room, having a great time. The food is arriving exactly on time, so you assume, wow, this operation is flawless.
But the kitchen is a different story.
Exactly. What you can't see is that back in the kitchen, the expediter is screaming, the line cooks are running out of prep materials, and the dishwasher is secretly on fire.
Yeah, the plates are still coming out, but the system is depleting its reserves to do it.
Right.
That captures the structural vulnerability perfectly because the system is literally consuming its own organizational capital to maintain the illusion of output.
And no one notices until it's too late.
No, because no single delayed response or, slightly misunderstood email is enough to trigger a crisis. So leaders just normalize the friction.
They just think, oh, it's a slow Tuesday.
Exactly. They assume people are just having a heads down week. But what is actually happening mechanically is that the underlying trust and clarity of the entire organization are decaying.
Wow.
When people have to spend more energy navigating the communication system than doing the actual work, their cognitive load just completely maxes out.
Okay, so if the cognitive load is maxing out just to maintain the appearance of productivity, that explains the silent burnout phenomenon we saw in the sources.
Yes. It's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Because the tasks are getting done, right? The plates are leaving the kitchen. But the human beings pushing those plates are mentally exhausted. And the manager has zero visibility into that exhaustion because the employee is still performing their digital duties.
Performing is the exact right word there. We have to remember that looking productive in a remote environment is often a deliberate, highly energy-intensive performance.
Oh, totally. Moving the mouse so the screen doesn't go to sleep.
Yes. Employees know how to schedule their emails to look active at certain hours. They know exactly how to keep their status green.
Right.
But maintaining that digital performance masks the reality that their intrinsic motivation, their capacity for deep focus, and their creative problem solving are just plummeting.
And the sources mentioned it's not just exhaustion, right? It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. The most critical phase of this decline isn't just being tired, it is profound emotional disconnection from the company's mission.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because I know there are leaders listening who look at business through a strictly utilitarian lens.
Sure.
If an employee is getting their assigned tasks done on time, and the business's daily operations are functioning fine, why should a leader care if that employee is emotionally disconnected? I mean, isn't getting the work done the entire point of an employment contract? We aren't asking them to marry the company.
I hear that a lot. That is a super common defense, but it fundamentally misunderstands how complex businesses actually survive over the long term.
How so?
When an employee becomes emotionally disconnected, their work shifts from being collaborative to purely transactional. And transactional work destroys the informal safety nets that catch inevitable structural errors.
The informal safety nets.
Yeah, think about the mechanics of compliance. If an emotionally invested employee sees a set of instructions that has a flaw in it, what do? They pause the workflow, bridge the gap, and ask a clarifying question because they care about the outcome.
And if they're just transacting?
If they're just transacting, literally just trading hours for dollars in a digital void, they will look at that flawed set of instructions, do exactly what is written, knowing full well the project will fail, and then log off at 5 p.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They shift the liability back to the manager. Their mindset is, hey, I did what you asked. You lose all discretionary effort.
That's terrifying.
It is, because in a remote environment, you simply cannot write standard operating procedures for every possible edge case. You rely on your team's judgment to navigate the gray areas. Emotional disconnection eliminates that judgment entirely.
They will do exactly what is written, knowing full well the project will fail. That illustrates the hidden cost so beautifully. It's essentially apathetic compliance.
Apathetic compliance, that is the perfect term for it.
But this forces us to look at the other side of the equation, right? The leadership. If employees are shifting into apathetic compliance and masking their burnout behind a green dot, why are managers allowing this ecosystem to develop?
Well, the sources point heavily toward a specific brand of passive leadership that really thrives in remote work.
Passive leadership, like just not doing anything.
Kind of. It's arguably the greatest operational risk in a distributed company. Think about it in an office. It takes active effort to ignore a struggling employee because they are sitting right in front of you.
Yeah, you have to literally walk past them looking miserable.
Exactly. But in a remote setting, ignoring them is the default state. Managers just take the path of least resistance.
They just look at the dashboard.
Right. They rely purely on the dashboard of completed tasks because it prevents them from having to initiate difficult, nuanced conversations about engagement or career trajectory.
There's a psychological mechanism there too. Because in an office, a manager can soften a tough conversation easily. They can say, hey, let's go grab a coffee, and it lowers the stakes.
Yep, it's casual.
But remotely, sending a calendar invite for a 30-minute one-on-one titled Sync.
Oh, that triggers immediate panic.
Total anxiety for the employee. So the manager avoids sending the invite entirely unless someone is actively failing. And they disguise their conflict avoidance as empathy. They tell themselves, oh, I don't want to interrupt the team's busy workflow.
Right, I'm being a good boss by leaving them alone. But that avoidance creates a massive leadership vacuum. And when the structural cracks inevitably start to show, like when the missed deadlines finally happen or the quality drops, those passive leaders rarely look inward at their own management gaps.
So what do?
They look outward for a technological solution. They assume that if communication is failing, it must be the fault of the software.
Oh, of course. Blame the tool.
Always. So they implement a new product management tool, or they migrate the whole team to a different chat platform, hoping technology will magically solve a human behavior problem.
So what does this all mean? That dynamic is just staggering. A team's underlying trust and accountability are fracturing, and the manager's brilliant solution is to buy a new SaaS product. It's like buying a more expensive high-tech megaphone to yell at someone who doesn't speak your language.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how crisp the audio quality is, right?
Yeah.
The listener still doesn't understand the fundamental expectations you have of them. You're just transmitting confusion more efficiently.
That megaphone analogy is highly accurate because both scenarios entirely sidestep the core requirement of remote work, which is structural trust.
And trust doesn't just mean leaving people alone.
Exactly. A lot of leaders think remote trust means saying, work whenever you want, just get the job done, and then completely vanishing. That doesn't create trust. That creates chaos.
Right.
True trust requires the tedious hard work of establishing crystal clear expectations, transparent workflows, and then giving the employee absolute autonomy over the execution. The extremes are what kill remote teams.
Over-controlling micromanagement destroys morale.
And total disconnection destroys alignment.
Okay, so if we have a system where employees are performing apathetic compliance and managers are avoiding hard conversations by just throwing random software at the wall, we are basically building a pressure cooker.
A massive one.
But the sources note that these broken systems can coast for surprisingly long periods. So what is the catalyst? When does this pressure cooker finally burst?
Well, the burst is rarely a slow leak. It almost always presents as a sudden, catastrophic event to the leadership team, even though the rot had been setting in for quarters.
What triggers it?
It usually manifests when the company tries to scale. Growth is the ultimate stress test for hidden dysfunction.
Ah, that makes sense.
Right. Processes that rely on informal tribal knowledge might work totally fine when you have a tight-knit team of 6 people who constantly message each other all day.
Sure, because everyone knows everything.
But the moment you scale that exact same lack of structure to 20 people, the tribal knowledge completely shatters.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let me challenge the inevitability of that crisis for a second.
Okay, go for it.
I know business operators listening right now who might admit their internal communication is kind of messy, and maybe their team morale isn't stellar. But they just posted their most profitable quarter on record.
Right.
If the revenue is flowing aggressively, aren't these management systems technically validated? Like, it's really hard to convince a CEO their house is on fire when they are standing in a flooded bank vault.
That is the illusion of success. The fatal flaw in that logic is misunderstanding the nature of financial metrics. Revenue is a lagging indicator.
A lagging indicator.
It tells you how effective your operational systems were 3, 6, or sometimes 12 months ago. It tells you absolutely nothing about the health of your systems today.
Oh, wow. So you're riding on past momentum.
Exactly. High revenue can temporarily mask severe operational instability. It acts like a painkiller that just numbs the symptoms of a broken foundation.
The money acts like a painkiller. That's so true. So the executive team feels great, the board is happy, and they just assume the engine is running flawlessly. But the structural damage is quietly compounding in the background.
Precisely the danger. And you cannot out-earn a broken operational foundation forever. Eventually, that painkiller wears off.
And then what happens?
The burned-out senior talent leaves, and they take all that undocumented tribal knowledge with them out the door. The client experience degrades rapidly because the internal systems are too chaotic to maintain quality. And suddenly, the revenue falls off a cliff.
And by then, it's too late.
Way too late. If you are waiting for your revenue to dip before you evaluate your team's health, you are essentially managing the autopsy. You are trying to revive a patient that has already flatlined.
Which brings us to arguably the most important part of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've mapped out the pathology of the disease, right? The green dot illusion, the transactional compliance, the megaphone management, and the revenue lag.
Yep, the whole grim picture.
But we need to pivot heavily to the actionable stuff, the things to try outlined in our sources. If a leader recognizes these hidden warning signs in their team, how do they practically dismantle the mirage? What are the actual mechanical systems they need to implement tomorrow morning?
Okay, the absolute first step is recalibrating what you measure. As we touched on earlier, you have to transition from evaluating communication frequency to measuring communication quality.
Right, but wait, how do you actually measure communication quality without violating privacy or reading everyone's direct messages?
Yeah.
Because that sounds incredibly difficult to quantify objectively.
It's not about reading DMs. You measure it by looking at the ping pong effect in your public channels and your project boards.
The ping pong effect.
Yeah. If a standard task requires 20 back and forth clarifying messages before someone can even take action, your communication quality is abysmal. It means your initial briefs lack context. You solve this by implementing asynchronous decision logs and mandating what we call context-rich task assignments.
So no more one-sentence Slack requests.
Exactly. A task shouldn't just be a title. It needs the why, the strict definition of done, and all the resources attached up front. When you provide context up front, you eliminate the ping pong effect, and you lower the cognitive load for the entire team.
That is brilliant, because it makes the process the bad guy, not the people. If the ping pong effect is happening, the system failed to provide the necessary context.
Exactly right.
So what is the next practical step? The sources talk a lot about workload distribution, which seems obvious, but how do we usually get it wrong in remote settings?
We get it wrong by, again, relying on the path of least resistance. Managers tend to funnel the most critical work to their most reliable performer.
Because they know it'll get done without any hand-holding.
Right. It guarantees an outcome without requiring the manager to actually coach a junior employee. But this actively accelerates the burnout of your top talent.
How do you fix it?
The actionable fix here is transparent load balancing. You need a centralized, highly visible project board where everyone's bandwidth is public.
Like literally seeing who's overloaded.
Yes. When the team can visually see that the senior developer is carrying 80% of the complex tickets, it forces the manager to distribute the weight for that developer breaks.
And if that developer is the only one who knows how to do the work, that points to another massive vulnerability we saw. The lack of documentation.
Oh, documentation is everything. It is the physical infrastructure of a remote team. If a process, a decision, or a workflow isn't written down in a searchable, centralized hub, it simply doesn't exist.
Because you can't just tap someone on the shoulder.
No, and you cannot rely on someone needing to be awake in a specific time zone just to answer a basic question about how a system works. Leaders need to incentivize documentation by making it a core metric of performance.
So it's not just extra busy work.
Exactly. You don't just reward the person who solved the problem, you reward the person who documented the solution so it never has to be solved from scratch again.
That makes total sense. And that leads directly into how we conduct meetings. Because if everything is documented and asynchronous, what is the point of the standard check-in call?
The point of a structured check-in is no longer to deliver status updates.
Right, those could have been an email.
Exactly. Status updates should be asynchronous text. The live check-in must be aggressively repurposed to uncover blockers and gauge human energy.
How do you do that without sounding like a therapist?
You ask specific mechanical questions. Instead of how's everyone doing, you ask, what is the most frustrating bottleneck in your current workflow right now? Or where is our documentation failing you today?
But getting honest answers to those questions requires psychological safety. The sources heavily emphasize creating spaces for dissent without fear. How do you systematically build that? Because simply saying my door is always open on a Zoom call doesn't actually make anyone feel safe enough to criticize a broken process.
No, it doesn't. You build it by actively rewarding friction.
Rewarding friction.
Yeah. When an employee points out that a deadline is completely unrealistic or that a newly implemented system is actually slowing them down, you have to publicly validate that feedback.
Even if it's annoying to hear.
Especially if it's annoying. If a team member highlights a flaw and the manager gets defensive or penalizes them for being negative, the rest of the team learns instantly to never speak up again.
And they revert straight back to apathetic compliance.
Exactly. Psychological safety in remote work means dissent is treated as valuable diagnostic data, not as insubordination.
It's basically treating feedback as telemetry for your instruments. If you want to fly IFR, you have to trust the people calibrating the dials.
That's a great way to summarize it.
And this brings everything full circle, really. Strong remote culture isn't generated by mandatory virtual happy hours or sending everyone a branded coffee mug.
Oh, please, no more branded mugs.
Right. Culture is the operational clarity we just laid out. It is predictability, shared context, and the psychological safety to point out when the kitchen is running out of ingredients.
That is the core takeaway. Remote leadership requires proactive, mechanical awareness. You have to build systems that act as early warning radars, measuring ping-pong communication, balancing workloads transparently, and rewarding dissent. You cannot rely on reactive crisis management or lagging indicators like revenue.
Which reinforces the ultimate thesis for this deep dive. Activity does not equal stability.
It never has, and in a distributed environment, assuming it does, is basically operational negligence.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening exploration of the mechanisms failing behind the screens. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over. We've talked a lot about the internal cost of these hidden breakdowns, the inefficiencies, the burnout, the decay of trust.
And the silent killers.
Exactly. But consider the external threat. What happens when your competitors master this operational visibility while you are still just counting completed tasks and staring at a dashboard?
They'll eat your lunch.
They aren't just going to outperform you. They are going to quietly poach your burned out, emotionally disconnected top performers without you ever seeing it coming. Look at your team's green dots today. Are they truly engaged, or are they already halfway out the door?
Thank you for listening to The Remote Revolution. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with other professionals who are building the future of work. To learn more about how Virtual Mojo helps businesses grow with highly trained virtual assistants and remote support teams, visit www.virtualmojo.com. For inquiries or collaborations, reach out to us at contact@virtualmojo.com. Until next time, keep building smarter systems and embracing the future of work.